feel like I'm maybe drinking too much, and maybe we're not totally ready to acknowledge that it's there. But like you said, awareness is the first key. And if we just become curious about that little voice there and are willing to look at it, and now that we're aware it's there, like, can we just even just bring a little curiosity to it and be like, like what do I think it might look like to live life without alcohol, and really just allow some honesty to happen there. It can be really even for a period of time, like giving your body a break for 30 days is never going to hurt you.
Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Well, hey there. Welcome back to another amazing episode of A Life Worth Being. And today I want to get personal. Not that I don't usually get personal, but today a little bit more personal maybe than normal. And so I'd like to talk about alcohol and the consumption and all of that kind of good stuff that I grew up with. My mom was an alcoholic, so I was around alcohol as a kid a lot. And it was very accessible for me. So I actually started drinking at a fairly early age. And, realized that like by the time I was in high school and stuff, that it made me kind of popular. I was the life of the party. I always looked older than I was. So I was the one that could, get in and buy alcohol, believe it or not. So, I began to consume alcohol at a pretty regular pace and became very proficient at it. And then as I got older, I worked in bars as a bartender, and, it just was always a huge part of my life, not always a great part of my life. And so I made a lot of bad choices around alcohol and when I was consuming alcohol. So I finally got to a point in my life about 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, November 30th, it will be exactly 3 years that I decided to let alcohol go from my life. And I didn't do it traditionally because that didn't feel right to me. And today, my guest and I are going to have a conversation about all of that. Alcohol, the stigma of drinking, the stigma of not drinking, and kind of how things are changing around the conversation of alcohol and alcohol consumption. So I'm really excited for today's conversation, and I hope if this resonates with you, please listen and share it with someone that you know or yourself or whatever, and reach out if you need some help. So having said all of that, was kind of a lengthy introduction. Today, I am joined by Brandi Babb. She is a certified life and somatic coach who's on a mission to help people redefine their relationship with alcohol and reconnect with their inner strengths. Brandi left a successful career as a training and operations executive to dive into coaching after experiencing her own life-changing journey with separating from alcohol in 2019. Now, as the owner of Little Big Leap Coaching and the co-owner of Zero Proof Life, which is an online community, Brandi brings compassionate whole person approach to her work, guiding others towards lasting change and self-discovery. When she's not empowering clients, you will find her soaking up life in Long Beach, California. How I wish I was there right now because I'm pretty sure it's sunny. Anyway, she is also going to be soaking up that life alongside her husband, Jeff, embracing yoga, water, sushi dates, yay, sushi, and the joy of true connection. Please welcome Brandi Babb.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sue. I'm really excited about our conversation, and thank you for that lovely intro. So, thank
Try
you.
to make it as colorful as possible.
I appreciate it. And I hate to break it to you, but yes, it's quite sunny here today in Long Beach.
Thanks for making me feel bad. I was like playing with the heat before we got out. I'm like, am I chilly? Am I, it's rainy, it's damp. Am I cold? Am I warm? So it's all good.
Yes.
All good.
I'll send you a little sunshine today.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yes.
that. So here we are, not talking about much of anything. No, I'm really curious. I love that your work. I love. I've read about and I've been on your website for the Zero Proof community and your coaching website as well. Zero Proof Life, sorry. And I'm really curious how you came to that. I mean, I know how I came to my decision and so forth, but I want to hear a little bit about what brought you to wanting to redefine alcohol and people's relationships with it and without it.
Yeah, I love that too. And I love how you talk about redefining the relationship with it.
Mhm.
Because that is, it's definitely the language that I use and that we've used over in the Zero Proof Life. And I think that's one of the really wonderful elements is that the language is changing a lot these days. And there's, we're opening the doors of curiosity, right? Like, and I think the younger generations that are coming up right now are really in support of that too, which is exciting to see. So there's a lot of like sober curious, you hear that phrase, or gray area drinking, and low and no alcohol beverages are coming up on the market. So just even you talking about it through that lens, I think just is such a beautiful entry point for our conversation today. So but my own story and what brought me into it was um where I was the rule follower. So like you shared, it was the early on drinking that, and just which I hear from so many people, right? It's like
Mhm.
that social kind of that social lubricant and helps people ease in if they feel, maybe on the outskirts when they're younger and things like that. And I grew up in a household where it just was not going to be okay if I was drinking, and so I just didn't. And grew up in a household where one parent drank heavily and the other one didn't drink hardly at all, if ever. And so there was, for me, it was a bit of mixed messaging, right? Like as a kid, I saw both. I saw the negative impacts of alcohol, but there was also this like, ooh, there's a little bit of like, what is that over there in the corner? That I'm not allowed to touch. And so, as a rule follower, though, it wasn't until I turned 21 that I then kind of started exploring it. I was a bartender myself. And I was in the hospitality industry and the restaurant industry. And, every industry has it. It's funny. That's something I hear a lot from people of like, you just can't work in my industry without drinking alcohol, whether it's sales or teaching or medical, or it just seems like no matter what people are doing, alcohol is so often at the forefront.
Mhm.
And so that was certainly the case in mine. We were slinging it, selling it, then I was training it, and things along those
Sampling
lines
it.
too. Yes. Oh, big time. Oh, yes.
Hmm.
As the head of the training department, you've got to go through and do a whole, you're doing tours to tequila production facilities and wineries, things like that, breweries. It was really interesting. So, yeah, very much ingrained. And yeah, and I mean, things just kind of quickly accelerated for me, but to like essentially fast forward, my drinking went from being out socializing, being with friends, out with my husband on dates, to all of a sudden traveling by myself, drinks at the hotel bar, drinks at room service, and then coming home and husband goes to bed, I stay up late, I come home from with friends after spending time out with friends, monitoring my drinking. Like, is anyone noticing that? Am I keeping up? Am I keeping pace with everybody else? I don't want to drink too much while I'm out and about. And then coming home and like, okay, whew, now I can drink the way I want to. And
Yeah, yeah.
can you relate to that, Sue?
Oh, totally,
Yeah.
totally. All of those
Yeah.
things that you do, like when you're I don't mean to interrupt you, but when you're at a dinner table, where's the bottle of wine? Why is it not closer to me?
Yes. Whereas like I would start looking for the server, right? Like kind of evaluating, okay, I've got about that much left. I can see the how much is left in the bottle. There's
Yeah.
three, like all the calculating that's going on.
Yes. 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 It's,
Amazing.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And I think a lot of people do it, but they don't admit that they're doing it.
Yeah. And I think for a long time, I wasn't even really aware that I was doing it or that it was, maybe
Mhm.
problematic that it was happening that I was doing it. And then it started becoming more problematic for me. A big thing for me was in my mid 30s, I started, I'm 47 now. And in my mid 30s, I started looking at like, is this really how I want to be drinking? Like, is this how I want to be living? I wouldn't say the question yet was, is this how I want to be drinking? But the question was, is this how I want to be living? And my husband and I live in a very walkable community with a lot of restaurants and bars just down the street. And so that was a lot of our patterning, with friends. We don't have kids. We would be, just go out to dinner, meet up with friends for drinks, and then walk home. And we were coming home one night, and there's this bridge that we have to cross over to get to our house. And we were walking home, and maybe a little stumble home. And I remember just having this moment where I we were walking over that bridge, and I just was like, is this really what I want my life to look like? Because the trajectory I see is that this is what it's going to look like another 10, 20, 30 years from now if I don't change something, if something doesn't change. And that was the first real time I remember like a little click happening of there needs to be a shift here, because life just wasn't headed in the direction that I wanted it to be headed in. There were things that were missing from my life that I really wanted, things that I'd let slide in my life that were no longer working out the way I wanted them to. I mean, with my health, my reproductive health was a big problem. There was just a lot of different components. I felt like the career I was in just kind of happened versus being one that I had really intentionally chosen.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of things that were just not feeling aligned. And so that little click happened around 35. And then over the course of the next few years, it was like, oh, I'll take a couple weeks off or take a month off. But there was still a lot of fixation around alcohol that I realized. And then finally back in 2019, I really had this like moment, between Christmas and New Year's, of 2018. And I was like, something has to change. Something's got to shift. And I really need to just focus on alcohol and focus on giving it up for a period of time and just see what happens. And so I did this online alcohol experiment for the month of January. I started at January 2nd. And about 2 weeks into that process, I realized like I'm like 30 days isn't going to be enough. I wasn't ready to admit it at the start, but then I slowly but surely I'm like, okay, let's go to 60 days. All right, hit 60 days. Let's see what it feels like to go to 100 days. And over the course of that next year, it quickly revealed itself that this was a place it was a substance I didn't want to go back to.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of the short and sweet of it. There's so many things in between there, I'm sure you can imagine, but
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. So
Well,
that's
good for you for, yeah, coming to that realization. And, I think, like you said, in the back of your mind, the fact that you were kind of like, let's see, how long is it going to take them to bring me another drink to the table? And what is everybody else's drink level at? Do I have time for another one before, where is that server? What's going, those kinds of things. It does kind of like tickle the back of your brain going, why am I concerned with these things? Why am I even thinking about these things? Why am I even, what's going on here? So yeah, I think that, like me, I, I could, I'll be honest, I could drink anybody under the table. I was a professional,
yeah,
and that's not something you really want to be professional at, and the older you get, and also, like reading studies about, as we age, as women especially, um, I think all the time we process alcohol differently than men do anyway. I mean, their
hmm
bodies just operate differently than ours do. And I think, you know, as we get older, it's our bodies don't process alcohol well. And
Absolutely. And that's just straight
yeah,
fact.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as women in particular, like you saying that, as women in particular, we, so alcohol is like crosses the blood brain barrier,
Mhm.
and our cells lose more water as we age, once we cross into midlife. So a lot of times I hear from people and from friends like, oh, my hangovers have just gotten so much worse. Like they used to,
Right.
like when I was in my 20s I used to bounce up and no problem, and I
Right.
remember
Couple of
going to
glasses
work.
of water and you're like,
Yeah,
bring
I'm
it.
good. Right, give me a Gatorade and I'm fine at 25. And then that starts to shift and change in midlife, and you're like, what is going on here? And a lot of it has to do because of the changes in our bodies, and so we have less water in our cells, and so alcohol actually like permeates the cells even more. And so there's reason behind that, and so then and so many other elements of ways that it's impacting our bodies and our physiology.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense, right, that you hit that point where like this just it maybe there was fun here before, but the pain and the recovery is really just there. It's such a pain point for me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I kind of had a similar, I wish I had had a little bit. I've had several wake up calls. Don't let me, don't, I'm not kidding you on that one. But when I finally got to the point where, I was like, I want to be clear headed, as a coach and in my life and, and how I treat people and it just, all of that. I just didn't want that in my life anymore. And before we got on, we kind of talked a little bit about, not just redefining the relationship with alcohol, but redefining the language around it. And I
Mhm.
saw a great TED talk or something one time where, and I forget who it was, but she was talking about how when people quit smoking, everybody around you is like, yeah, right on. That's so awesome. Congratulations. That's amazing. And then when you tell somebody that you quit drinking, they're like, what was wrong with you? Did you have a problem? I'm like, do you know me? I mean, come
Yes.
on, right? You know, I, people are like shocked and a little put off, like, oh my God, you quit drinking? What? What? First of all, it's like, why?
Yes.
Why? And that's a good question. Why? What?
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not a good fit anymore. Probably wasn't for a long time, but it's interesting the reaction from people. I actually did. I think it was like after 30 days that I hadn't had any alcohol. I posted on Facebook or something, and I got a lot of DMs that were like, "What's going on? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine now." Right?
Yes,
It's
exactly.
curious to me about the reaction.
Yeah, and it's such a huge, I mean, it's kind of the elephant in the room, right? When it's really one of the only substances, like legal substances that we consume that people really question why
Mhm.
we would stop doing it, right? Like people don't question if you stop eating meat or gluten or sugar, or it's like good for you, way to go, but as soon as alcohol comes into the table, like you said, it's that question of, wait, what happened? What's wrong? Everyone assumes that there's a rock bottom, and that
Right.
rock bottom having a specific moment. You got in an accident, maybe you go into jail, you got a ticket, whatever it might be, right? Like
Yeah.
you lost your marriage or your children. Like there are assumptions that like the worst case scenario is what happened, instead of it being like, no, this is an intentional choice that I'm making for my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And I think, and that speaks so much to the societal messages that we just get around alcohol, and that it's necessary for us to relax, it's necessary for us to parent, it's necessary for
Mhm.
us to celebrate holidays, it's celebrate in general, deal with grief, like all of the things. Alcohol, like all roads lead to alcohol.
You're
um
true. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And I think it was really for me, once I started seeing that and being able to like question that, and looking at like, wait, where did I learn that from? Like, why do I think that's the case? And then really starting to look around, and we start seeing, gosh, I don't know if you watched Disney movies when you were growing up as a kid, but
Oh my god, they
watching,
come home and have a martini and,
yes,
bewitched and,
oh yeah. Well, I mean, even the animated films, right? Like Cinderella, and they're sloshing. I just remember that visual of like sloshing red wine coming out of at the ball, right? Coming out of the glasses. And
Yeah.
you think about that messaging starts at such a young age, that this
Mhm.
is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to be an adult.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like to engage in life, and how you make friends. And we could just talk about that for an hour
Right?
probably.
Well, and the first thing out of somebody's mouth, you meet somebody new or whatever, like, "Hey, let's go grab a drink."
Yes, so true. Yeah, absolutely. Sue, what I'm curious, like knowing that you've almost come up on 3 years now, which
Yeah.
congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you. Thank you.
What do you do like for your social? Like how has it shifted your social life and how you spend time with people?
It's funny, it hasn't. I mean, you would think, some people really have to, lose their friends and not hang around with the same people or anything, but I think honestly, because I had put in so much personal work prior to quitting drinking, and because I did just quit drinking on my own, I didn't go to AA. That's just not my jam, or anything else, and that I just really did it in a way that felt good to me, and that I felt strong enough that I could do it myself. That gosh, I'm trying to, like within the first month or first couple weeks or whatever, I went out, and the first time I went out with friends who I knew were, drinkers, which all my friends were, and not, but just to go out and be in that social atmosphere. To your point of earlier, you mentioned that there are now really good non-alcoholic options. You can go in any bar and get a mocktail, or you can get, usually a non-alcoholic beer, which I was a big beer drinker. The wine, they haven't quite perfected that yet. But
Agreed.
but yeah, but you still can get things so that you're not sitting at the table, nursing a glass of water all night. So you don't feel like oh, look at it, she's not drinking. What's the deal? So that I think helps with the social situation, but I thought it would be harder than it was to go out with friends and not drink. And, I just quickly found alternatives like hop water or some other thing that, kind of had a taste of something that I enjoyed, um, but that also made me feel like an adult and not the kid drinking the soda at the table or whatever. And I think a lot of that is it's a social thing where people, don't want to quit because it's going to be obvious that they're not drinking with their friends or whatever. So I think that, like I said, because I had done a lot of now, all right, let's look at the other side of the coin. My mom, who drank very heavily, was an alcoholic, quit drinking cold turkey as well, did absolutely zero work. She was not from an era where there was personal development. She was born in 1932. So those things just were, so she didn't do any personal work and was, had that alcoholic personality and would just, fly off the handle. She did quit cold turkey as well, but the difference between the work that I put in prior to that, and it was like, okay, this is one last thing that I need to get rid of that's no longer serving me. So with her, it was just, there's a lot more to the story, obviously, but you know, so I don't know if that answered your question or not, but it was the
Yeah, it
social thing
does.
is challenging to a lot of people, I think, and it's, if your friend, it's like going on a diet and your friend holding a bag of M&Ms in front of you. You sure you don't want one? Are you
Right.
sure? What's one drink gonna have? What? Just have the red M&Ms or just have the blue ones. It's like, and it's
Yeah.
hard. And some people really do have to give up their friends, right? And find a different community that's supportive. And so that's why I understand why AA can work for some people. I just not my jam.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't go the, what you'd say is the traditional route of AA either, but one of the really big, I think, important parts, like to what you're speaking to, is that AA really offers the community. And
Mhm.
for people that haven't done the self work like you have, or I found other ways to go about doing that, like
Yeah.
it provides some structure and some like and that element of community so that you don't have that feeling of being alone in it. Because I love hearing that you like seamlessly just spent time with your social groups and your friend groups. And,
Yeah.
mine definitely went through some transitions. Like I had, groups that I spent a lot of time with that literally met at bar, literally met at a bar. And so there was some kind of some, for me, it felt a little bit like there was some closing down a little bit and then some further expansion because I found friends in the alcohol free or the sober community that all of a sudden, like we were speaking the same language about, because it's not just about quitting drinking usually, right? It's about wanting to better your life in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
everybody's in therapy or as coaches or is doing reading similar books and you're on that journey together in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the members of our community, I was just doing an event the other day, and she asked me a question, asked me to speak to something, and she said, "Can you tell me about like the challenges that came up in your first year of not drinking? Like the craving challenges." And it's such an interesting question because I think it sounds similar like to you where I had just made a decision to not drink, right? Like it was progressive. I'm not drinking for 30 days and I'm not drinking for 60 days. Like that was the pattern that worked for me. But like I had made that decision. So alcohol cravings arose, sure. But I was like, I'm not answering them. I'm not answering them.
Right.
And so, but what's so interesting about that first year too, and I don't know if this resonates for you, but like that first year is really about like, well, that's all of a sudden I realized how much that's been my go-to response for so many things, whether
Mhm.
it's at the end of the, work day or the work week or the thing, the event, whatever it is, like the hard emotions coming up, the grief I'm dealing with, the stressful, we could go on and on with the reasons and lists.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now I don't have that thing to pull from anymore. That's kind of been my buddy, my friend, like my confidant in this. And so that can be I think even for me, like not so much the social element, but like that part of it was one of the hardest parts was trying to figure out now, wait, what's my new thing I'm going to, or how do I get through this without what I've had? Um, and yeah, I think that can be just a really interesting part of the process and journey for people, and that's really where the work comes in. I don't know if
Hmm.
if you'd agree with that, but for me, that was definitely the case.
Yeah, I mean, I started off. I mean, it was it was interesting because I knew I was going to be alone for the month of December. My friends had gone back east, and it's kind of a weird thing to do dry December because that is the drinking month of the year, right?
It's
You've got
very
all of
brave. Yes.
I know, like, what am I thinking? Most people go with dry February because there's only 28 days in it, right? So I
Right. Exactly.
can do
It's
this
a
for
short one.
28 days. So I started, actually it was November 30th. So that was my first day without alcohol. And I just, it's funny because I wrote my little journal here. I just started journaling about what I was thinking about and how, when you're writing stuff down about, you start thinking about, oh, what kind of wine am I going to have with dinner? Or, what kind of, I think it was the pandemic really that did me in because it was like, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, a lot of
So
that.
you had already quit before the pandemic. Sorry. So I didn't get to take advantage of that full scenario. But that was at
Thank
the point where I was
goodness.
like,
From where I
yeah,
was
right.
headed, thank goodness. Yeah.
I get it. So the November 30th was like a bonus day, right? That I didn't drink. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's kick it off. And it was like, okay, no, I'm not going to go one last day and have drinks at the restaurant or do whatever, go out to dinner or do something like that. I'm just going to I'm home. I'm not going to drink and see what happens. And yeah, it was, and then I started to become aware. And a lot of times with my coaching is just building awareness,
Yeah.
for people, not around drinking, but just in general. And I think when you start to build awareness around, like you were talking about, oh, huh, okay, it's noon and I'm thinking about what I'm going to drink later in, or, when can I start drinking?
Right. Yeah.
Or, all that stuff. Uh, and now, I mean, it's just, by the time I got through December, like you said, then I'm like, well, I don't want to start again.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
didn't. I honestly didn't. And I had been out to bars and restaurants with people and it didn't even want anything. I wasn't repulsed by it. I wasn't bothered that other people were drinking, so it just didn't, and it just progressed from there.
That's wonderful.
December
You were
went into
really ready.
January. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you
let's
can
face it,
tell.
after 50 years of drinking, it's about time.
Yeah. And I mean, and I want to normalize it. Like, I think the story that you're sharing and that I'm sharing is not everybody's story,
No,
right?
it's
Like,
not.
there's a lot of people who you're like, I think I want to quit, but I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I can. I don't know if my marriage or my partnership is going to fall apart if I do.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do my job without it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through the, loss of my parent without it. All of these, like, I think all these things come up for people. And so I feel very fortunate that, like, similar to you, I was just ready for that change to happen.
Yeah.
And, but I also, like, for me, I know I wasn't, and I think I touched on this, but, like, it wasn't like I just woke up one day and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done drinking. I
No.
had been in therapy for years. Prior, I had tried quitting multiple times on my own, but there was a lot of, like I mentioned before, a lot of fixation
Mhm.
on, okay, I'm quitting for a month, Wednesday 31, right? Like,
Right?
so I can have that, I do these like resets, and kind of prove to myself that I could take a month off of drinking, be like, okay, well, it's not that bad then. If I can, not drink for a month, then it's
Yeah.
okay. And so, I think, like, and like you knew, Sue, when you got to that point, you're like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And once you get through those first few weeks,
Mhm.
getting through that first month is really like, I mean, even just like, so the first 3 days, there's people that need to go in active, like, care during that time, depending on their level of alcohol use.
Mhm.
And so, but after 3 days, like, the chemicals are out of your system, right? The alcohol chemicals are out of your system after 72 hours. But then you also have, still, for the next 7 to 10 days, you still have hormone fluctuations that are happening in your body. So the cravings can still come on, right?
Mhm.
And then you start having the cravings that can show up, after the 10-day period. For people, like, you can have the cravings that show up that are like, oh, there's this uncomfortable emotion that's arising. I don't know what to do with sadness. And normally I drink so that I don't have to feel my sadness. And then those can kind of start to arise as well. And so it's interesting because there's these different, like, phases that people go through where it's like, oh no, am I going to get stuck here forever? In this, like, part of the process. And, I think that can be one of the things that makes people a little nervous about it too, is that, like, am I going to feel this way forever? And things really, it takes a stretch of time for things to stabilize. I don't know
Mhm.
about you, but it took me about a good 6 months before I was starting to feel really, like, kind of stable emotionally and consistent. In, life was still going up and down and had all of these things, and I was, still dealing with a lot. But it did feel like it took about 6 months for me to really kind of find a place of, like, okay, I feel like I can get through the day to day in a more stable place, than I what felt a few months ago. Like, I was able to note those changes. So I don't,
Yeah.
did
Interesting.
you do you remember any of that for yourself?
I don't know. It's funny. It's, when I say it's only been 3 years, at the same time, I feel like it's been a lifetime almost. And, like you said, I think I was really ready to let that go. And given the amount of alcohol that I consumed on a regular basis for the number of years that I consumed that I consumed at that level, I'm still kind of stunned and amazed that I was able to walk away from it without major repercussions or without backsliding or without whatever. Now, there may come a time in my life when I decide to say, maybe I can drink with more, a more reasonable thing. But part, I, it's not even like something that I think about. Like maybe someday I can, just have a glass of wine and call it good. I don't know. And I don't know that I really want to test it. And it's not like you know, I go to the grocery store, I walk through the wine department or that doesn't bother me. I'm not like, oh geez, man, that gin looks really good. I will admit a gin and tonic looks really good sometimes, but at the same time, it's not like I'm gonna like I'm jonesing for it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, part of me kind of, I'm sure it was, and I was just kind of going back and looking at my journal. It was more difficult than I remember it being now, right? In hindsight, but at the same time, like I said, I'm stunned and amazed that I was able to do what I did the way I did. So clearly, I was ready, and
Yeah,
that's what I
that's
feel like that.
fantastic.
Yeah. What I'd like to know is I want to know more about Zero Proof Life, your community,
Yeah.
and how you work with individuals, and tell me a little bit more about how that came about
Yeah, I'd be
and
happy to.
yeah, all that kind of stuff because I'm fascinated.
Yeah, thank you. So I mentioned I did that 30-day program, right, to kind of kick
Mhm.
off my own start. And I had coaches through that program. And so I decided, I think I mentioned when I was telling a little bit about my story, like my career just didn't feel like it had the roots to me that I really wanted and was craving. And
Well, just for a second, you were
yeah, please.
training in operations in some sort of beverage business? Is that where
It was in the hospitality industry.
hospitality?
So
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
So
so I was the vice president of training and operations, and we were a tap room brand. And
okay.
yeah, so a tap room meaning beers on tap. Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it was really interesting. And so, I kind of hit this point then where I hadn't been drinking for a period of time and I'm like this feels really now it's starting to feel really incongruent with what I believe and how I'm living my life. Here I am teaching other people and leading this team that's teaching other people and like it was feeling really incongruent for me. And I had this, I'd had a training in an HR background and started seeing coaching and I was like, gosh, this is what I really would like to do. I'd like to be able to support other people to move forward in their life without alcohol. And so I went through a alcohol coaching program to become a certified coach through there, and then went on to become a certified life coach. And I have gone through a variety of programs over the years, and over the course of time it's led me to different whether my own work or work with clients has led me to different modalities. And so in recent years, in the last 2.5 years, I've been really working with trauma and with the nervous system and in a program to support that because not surprisingly you can see alcohol is often used to there's a lot of dysregulation that happens in our day-to-day lives. We get stuck kind of in overdrive or we have no like we feel like we can't get out of bed in the morning, and alcohol is a change agent, and so it changes how we feel in any moment quickly, right? As you and I both well know, it
Yeah.
changes how we feel. And so a lot of the work that I now do with people and teach is like, okay, how can you within you, what are the tools and the resources that you have within you to change your state without using a substance? And so we work on building a foundation around that. But so all these different tools have come into play in the coaching work that I now do. And so I started off strictly doing one-on-one coaching with people, but the coaching business can get to be a little bit lonely as well,
Mhm.
right? Just working with people strictly one-on-one, and kind of being a business owner of one by yourself, and maybe you've got some support people, but I was finding it to be pretty, pretty hard on me as well. And what I was seeing with a lot of people too was that I was coaching in these larger group programs, and that community element was so important. And so I was supporting and coaching in these big group programs. We'd be coaching a couple thousand people at once, even. And the power of community just like continued to shine through. Well, four other coaches and I got together after we'd been coaching for a couple of years, and we were like, hey, we want to provide a place that is provides more of an intimate kind of gathering for women to be able to work through this and talk through what's going on in their lives. And so we created the Zero Proof Life at that time. And so that was about 2.5 years ago now that we got up and going. And so we started offering challenges where we do a 30-day challenge and provide a lot of information around, hey, what's the science of how alcohol impacts us? What are some ways that you might be able to think about how alcohol is showing up around you and in your life that maybe you haven't looked at or been aware of before. And and then the Zero Proof Life, it provides a community for people to talk. So we do Zoom calls, and we do live Q&As where people get an opportunity, like a coach is talking, but people can ask questions and chat. And then there's essentially, we're on a private platform, but kind of like a Facebook page, right, where people can engage and talk to each other and share wins and ask for support. And we've had a lot of people come out of there with accountability buddies, and people can come and like talk through what's going on for themselves and the challenges, but also the wins. We've got people in there who are like, all right, we just had someone celebrate a year alcohol free a week ago, and so she came on and was celebrated that. But also, like, it's encouraging when you are kind of stuck in your perpetual day ones, or I'm here again. It's encouraging when you see what other people are capable of doing,
Yeah,
and getting
absolutely.
to, yeah. So that's a little bit about the Zero Proof Life. So I run it with four other coaches and myself, and we all come from different backgrounds, and but we were all trained under the same initial program of coaching. But we have one owns a Pilates studio, so a lot of understanding of the body. Another who is a nurse practitioner, or excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, a PA, sorry, a physician assistant,
Right.
excuse me. And so just all these different backgrounds, one who's an ecotherapist, like we all have these different backgrounds. And then, I come in with my training background, but then also with the somatic practitioner background now as
Right.
well.
I was just
Yeah.
gonna get to that because I do know that you're in a somatic healing program as well.
Yes, which is
That's huge.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. Yeah, that's great. I love that community that you've built. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds, you know, like a community that people would want, that doesn't have a stigma attached to it, right? And I say that with loving kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we're really trying to change that, right? Like, we're trying to change the stigma around it. And the five of us really try and represent that. Like, we have active, full lives that just don't include alcohol.
Mhm.
And our lives have actually gotten bigger and fuller in a lot of ways because we're not drinking alcohol, right? Like, we've had major life changes that we've all navigated or gone through, and big choices that we've had to make in our lives, and we wear those in front of our community, and to be like, hey, this is what life, we also have struggles, a lot of struggles, and so we're like, this is what life looks like. And um we get to not just coach people through their own challenges, but we also get to be guides in that way, and just say, hey, like, look, we're just one step ahead of you on this, and so we'll teach you
Mhm.
what we know and what we've learned. And so getting to be able to share that with people is really special. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I love all of that. And I love hearing you talk about things this way, like you said, redefining the relationship with alcohol, how we talk about it, how we talk about, life without alcohol. I think before we started, it's like, the word sobriety, I don't know, it's a funny word. It doesn't sound positive to me, and it never has. Do you know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
know why, but it has a funny. I wish we could. Can we come up with a different word? I mean, I like the zero proof thing. I think that's great, or the alcohol free, or I don't know, whatever. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Sobriety sounds dark and dank, and I don't know. It's just me,
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of people that feel that way. I mean, and the word, sober is so close to somber as well. So I
yeah,
don't know if
yeah,
that is part of it, but I think again, also coming back to what like what the conversation around sobriety has been and like the larger scope of things, there's an idea that you're being deprived in some way. One,
yeah,
something's wrong with you, and
yeah,
two, you're being deprived of something. And that's so much of the conversation that we're trying to change, is that there's no depriving. Like, we're
right,
just living life from this really clear place. And how, what a gift that is to, like, we often hear, like we've said, and we often hear people say, it feels like I went from living my life in black and white to living it in like full color.
yeah,
And
like,
getting to feel and experience everything. I mean, even our senses and how they change when you quit drinking. Your vision gets
mhm,
better, your taste gets better. um, all of these different things that are impacted by alcohol that we don't even realize, because it's impacting every system in our body.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
we don't know it. It impacts. And I think one of the biggest ones, and I just want to touch on this real quickly because I think
mhm,
this comes up especially so often for women, is that I'm using alcohol to de-stress. Like, how am I going to de-stress if I don't? But such a huge thing that I think is missed, and it's just not common knowledge, is that alcohol actually increases stress because it increases the cortisol and the adrenaline in our bodies.
mhm,
And that lasts 4 days. So we are perpetually more stressed. So even though we have that like immediate feeling of, oh, I'm coming down and relaxing, that it lasts for such a short period of time,
mhm,
that because of the way that the chemicals work in our just base physiology, and a way to protect us, because alcohol is it our body treats it like a poison. Alcohol it's ethanol, which
mhm, yeah, yeah.
ethanol is, it's ethanol alcohol. That's ethyl alcohol. That's like what goes in our gas tanks.
I know. I
And
was just thinking that. I'm like, you don't get a
yeah.
breakfast. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah. That was actually a big help for me when I was quitting drinking. And obviously it's not, apples to apples, but it's in
right,
there.
yeah,
And one of the tools that I would use is, if I was a red wine drinker. And like, so if I was craving red wine, I would imagine that like I was putting a gas tank, like,
oh,
or a gas gun,
interesting,
like the
yeah,
gun in my wine glass. Like, I would picture that, and it would immediately, like, it made my stomach turn, and it was a helpful visual for me to just
yeah.
even
There you
imagine.
go.
Yeah. So anyway, you get me fired up, Sue. I like there's so many, just so many big topics around this that I think people just are unaware of. And so, we might have this, like, there's like a little bit of this maybe like tug that's like, gosh, I feel like I'm maybe drinking too much, and maybe we're not totally ready to acknowledge that it's there. But like you said, awareness is the first key. And if we just become curious about that
Mhm.
little voice there and are willing to look at it, and now that we're aware it's there, like, can we just bring a little curiosity to it and be like, huh, like, what do I think it might look like to live life without alcohol, and really just allow some honesty to happen there. It
Yeah,
can be really, even for a period of time, like giving your body a break for 30 days is never going to hurt you.
yeah.
So
And I think that awareness and that curiosity without shame.
yes,
Because
100%.
I think, if you, and I mean, this has happened to me as well. When you're curious about it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, I do have a problem. And then you just feel shameful. And then you're like, well, screw it.
Yeah,
I'll
it's a
just
huge
keep
part.
drinking. It's not going to make a difference. But
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that. So, as we're wrapping up here, I'd like to just how, and you were just kind of talking about building awareness and curiosity. If someone who is listening today is like, yes, this conversation is resonating with me, what would you tell them would be like what would be the top 2 or 3 tips that you might want to give them?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few different places to start. I think one is just the fact that even if you're acknowledging, like if you've listened this far because you're like, oh, is there going to be something here
Yeah.
that'll be shared? I think just paying attention to that alone and follow that, right? So there's so many amazing resources today that you can quietly check out, whether it, like you mentioned, some wonderful books, right? Like
Mhm.
there's do a quick search for quick lit quit oh my goodness, quit lit. If I could only say that, right? Quit lit, and if you do a Google search for that and the amount of books that are going to come up around people's memoirs and their drinking stories,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of amazing beautiful resources that are out there now that you can order a book or listen to it on Audible, and get it from your local library. That's a great thing. Another wonderful thing to do is there's a lot of fantastic social accounts out there that are providing wonderful resources for people. And it's, the conversation is so much bigger now. Like the possibilities are so much bigger than AA. And I think that is just starting. People are just starting to maybe become aware of that, but you don't know unless you're looking for it. And so, if AA resonates for you, wonderful. You can do online meetings now on Zoom. And there's also other communities that you can find out there. So there's a lot of programs like I mentioned, the Zero Proof Life. We do 30-day challenges. You can join a community to do a challenge, or you can just do it on your own by yourself. And, I'd say the big thing is just continue to lean into the curiosity of it. Read, Google how does alcohol impact the body? Check out the American Cancer Society's page and what their references are around alcohol. Things like that, 'cause knowledge is power in
Mhm.
that capacity. And, the amount of, and I say the American Cancer Society because it's documented that alcohol increases the odds of 7 types of cancer. And a
Hmm.
big one is that there's no healthy amount of alcohol for our bodies. Like there's no, for when it comes to cancer, it increases the risk of breast cancer. Even just drinking a couple of glasses of something a week. And
Mhm.
so really leaning into getting curious.
Yeah.
Find the places that are can open up that information for you. And Google's a great place to start.
Mhm.
And so, but yeah, I would suggest those things of like, personally, I like resources, right? Like
Yeah, I was just
give
wondering
me
if
some
you
places.
do you have a resources page like
Yeah,
on. Okay.
actually I do.
Yeah. So
So
that's no, that's great. And so what I
yes,
would suggest is that, how people, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, A, and then I'll also put your resources page in the show notes along with your website and whatever else what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
perfect. Yeah, there's 2 ways. You either on Instagram is a good one, so at Little Big Leap. And then the other one is my website, which is where the resources page is. So I'll make sure and get that link to you. Yeah, Sue, thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
and then the community as well?
Yes,
The
and the Zero Proof Life community as well. Absolutely. So
Okay.
those are 2 separate accounts. So the Zero Proof Life or Little Big Leap are both places that you can find me. So,
I love
um,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you so much, and thank you for your
of
honesty,
course.
your vulnerability, just it's not something that we should be ashamed of. Here's my quick tip. When you go to the doctor and they ask you, "How many drinks per week do you have?" If you lie, you got a problem, right? Who doesn't lie? How many times have I
Yeah,
answered the questionnaire? 2 drinks a week. Really? Really? No, that's not the truth. So I'm just being
yeah.
honest with you here.
I've even heard physicians who've said they actually. I've heard a
Change it
couple
when you're not
physicians say
looking.
this. They immediately double what
Yeah,
someone writes.
or triple,
Yeah,
right?
they just assume double. So I'm like,
Right.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
good to
yeah.
know.
It's
Yeah.
kinda like, and I'll just stop with this one little anecdote, but, when we were we rafted the Grand Canyon, and then at the end they take you to the Double R Ranch or whatever, and you actually get to take a shower and everything like that. But you're still in the Grand Canyon, so they got to get you out. You get out by helicopter. So the helicopter comes back and forth, taking 2 or 3 people at a time, depending. And there's this old guy that on his shirt, who runs the helicopter company, it says, "If you lie, you die." He asks you how much you weigh, and then he adds like 30 pounds to it, because they have to do a weight and balance to make sure that the helicopter is going to get out of the Grand Canyon safely. But anyway, so you lie, you die. There you go. But but no, that's just one thing that I was thinking about, like, having the doctor ask you, how many drinks a week do you have? And you're like, 2. Is that per hour or per day that you're talking about? The doctor's like, I know you're lying to me. Anyway, so ending it on a bit of a light note, but that was a great conversation, Brandi. And I love what you're, talking about, and the community that you've built and all of that stuff. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm with you 100%. Let's get rid of the stigma attached to not drinking, and help people get to a place where they're happy with their lives and they're not hiding behind something else. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's been such a pleasure and honor. Thank you.
And anyone that's listening, if this is something that resonates with you, check out the resources that Brandi has, and we'll put some other things. I'll put a couple of books and resources in there that I've also appreciated when I was, having this consideration myself, and share this episode with a friend. Also, like, subscribe, review, rate, whatever, so that I can keep bringing you amazing guests like Brandi. And I just want to tell you, get ready, enjoy the holidays, and happy Halloween. You're probably going to be listening to this way after Halloween, but thank you for listening. I know you have a choice about where to place your earbuds, so thank you for being here, and take care. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend, and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website, links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.